We've got some very major news in the case of the SEC versus Ripple. Very major news. As you know, about a week ago, they decided to settle the case, and reduce the $125 million fine to $50 million and reduce and remove the injunction against Ripple. And yesterday, the Judge Torres, dismissed ruled that they can't do this and dismissed their ruling. Now, you're going to hear out there that this is a procedural finding, and all they have to do is file a different form. But I have a completely different take on this that you'll want to stick around for, because is the judge just protecting her own ruling, or is there something bigger going on behind the scenes? So everyone's buzzing about this, and a lot of people are saying, again, it's just procedural. But stick around, because what just happened could reshape every crypto case moving forward. And with that, remember that every single day in crypto is an adventure. And if you're not a subscriber, now's the time to hit the subscribe button, like, share, do all those things. And with that, let's get into talking about the case of SEC versus Ripple and Judge Torres's recent ruling. So look, yesterday, the judge rejects SEC and Ripple's proposed settlement deal. Now remember, the settlement, if you go back in history, we went back, let's see, if you go back to December 2020, the SEC sues Ripple because they said there's a $1.3 billion in unregistered XRP sales. And then in July of 2023, Judge Torres splits this up and says we have institutional sales equal securities, exchange sales do not equal securities. So basically said, there's two different things going on here. In August of 2024, there was a final judgment, which was the $125 million penalty and an injunction. Both sides filed an appeal. So basically, they wanted to see that the SEC wanted to say that these were all securities, and that the way that they were doing this constituted a security sale, whether it's through an exchange or in an institution. So they weren't basically not allowed to sell to institutions, and that obviously part of Ripple's plan is going to present a problem. So the SEC, they submitted a joint motion to dissolve the injunction. So the SEC obviously changed in December or January of 2025. You have removal of Gary Gensler, and the SEC vastly changed their stance, came together and said, look, with Ripple, and said, look, let's just get rid of the penalty down to $50 million from $125. Let's get rid of the injunction and let's settle. So the judge said, no, that we're not doing this. And here, look, they said it's on procedure. She said that the parties failed to use a Rule 60B, that's relief from judgment, or Rule 62.1, that's an indicative ruling. And they said that the exceptional circumstance bar has not been met. And she cited public interest precedent, the U.S. Bank Court versus Boner Mall, which courts don't vacate rulings just because parties want to settle. So in other words, the parties, if they agree to settle, the this is crazy. I mean, I make sense, but the judge doesn't have to agree to their ruling just because they want to settle. So we got to really think, is this a matter of egos? Is it a matter of just principle? So people say this is procedural, not personal. Judges guard precedent. Her order never says the deal is unfair or improper as filed. She just says that they're protecting clarity for the whole crypto market matters more than the two parties' convenience. So there is a bigger thing at play here, because, is it just because two parties agree to something, does that mean it's right ruling for the law? So the SEC and Ripple can refile under that Rule 60B with stronger public interest arguments. They have to show and prove that this has a public interest greater good that will allow this thing to be dropped and settled the way they settled it. Or they can pursue the appeals in the second court briefing, which would run late into 2025. So meanwhile, the injunction plus the $125 million penalty remain. And XRP, well, the case is not dropped. It's not settled. It might be settled, but it's not dropped. It's still there. So the real takeaway here is that the legal precedent is greater than the private settlement, I guess, in the judge's eyes. So XRP's regulatory cloud is not gone yet. So you should certainly watch the appellate docket and see what happens as we move forward. There's a lot more news that's going to happen on this, I believe. I don't think, even if they file the correct ruling, I don't think the judge is going to accept it, or maybe accept it with circumstance. I'm not sure. But right now, if you've made it this far, do me one single solitary favor. Hit that like button if you've learned anything at all. So right now, let's take a quick look at where XRP is. Let's pull this into the bigger screen, because yesterday we had a major drop. I mean, we went from $2.55 all the way down to $2.34. The market did not like this lack of settlement acceptance. And so where are we going from here? Well, we had a little bit of a rebound today. We're back up to, I don't know, where are we? 242. And so we're still down. XRP, it was up here at 265. It came all the way down about 11% on the news yesterday and came back. So we're still about, 7.5% from where we were 2 days ago. And if this legal battle draws on, people say once they've said that the legal battle is over. It is not over until the judge smashes that gavel in favor of the ruling. And we are not there yet. It could be months longer for this to get resolved. And the judge doesn't have to dismiss the case. It does not have to remove the injunction, does not have to remove the penalty. That was the judge's ruling. So really what we're dealing with is a judge who believes in their ruling, even though the two parties have come together to say, look, we'd like this dismissed, we've settled, and the judge doesn't have to uphold their settlement. The judge made a ruling, they post-ruling, they came to a settlement agreement, and then brought that back to the courts, and the courts are now saying, we don't, you didn't file this correctly. Now, they could have still dismissed the court. I think this was a buying of time, and they don't believe that the SEC and Ripple really proved their case that this is in the public greater interest and that the ruling stands. So that ruling could stand. They might have to further appeal the case and prove their point, and that might take some time. That's going to hurt Ripple from really skyrocketing because they don't want to be considered a security when selling to institutions. If you think about it, institutional adoption is where XRP is really wanting to go. And they're kind of throttled until they get that ruling that says they can do that. And that might take some time. I'm a big XRP holder, so I'm not super stoked about this news. But don't be fooled by everyone else out there that's saying this is purely procedural. Because, yes, it might be procedural, but it's just not they're not going to just fill out a form, because they could have done that right there. They could have filled out a form, handed it, and say, here's the form, judge. And the judge goes, oh, cool, you gave me the right form. You're good now. No. They have to prove, and what did I say? Let me look at my notes here. They have to prove that the exceptional circumstance, and that bar was not met in what they filed. So the exceptional circumstance basically says that courts don't vacate rulings just because parties want to settle. And that was proven with precedent in 1994 in U.S. Bancorp versus Bonner Mall. And so with that, we're going to have an ongoing legal battle, maybe not as big of a battle. Maybe the judge just says, hey, look, we're going to uphold this ruling, and then they have to appeal. Or maybe the judge just says, thanks for filing the paperwork. We see your point, and we're going to go on. I just don't know how that happens easily. And I could be very, very, very wrong on this. This is not financial advice. I'm not your financial advisor. So please remember that. But the price of XRP is going to be very volatile until they figure out, it's always going to be volatile. It's a crypto, let's face it. But until they figure out with what the court's going to decide, you're going to see a lot of volatility in the XRP price. You're going to see a lot of skepticism. You're going to see a lot of optimism. You're going to see a lot of people flinging rumors about what could happen and what won't happen. But we're going to see a lot of information on this moving forward. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, put them down below. And with that, hang in there, you XRP community. I believe in XRP long term. That's not financial advice. Do what you want. But with that, I will see you next time.